This video is a part of a free chapter from my new course, The Blendinator. Click the links in the description to learn more. Okay, so in the last video, this is the result that we got with all of our masks. So we got one mask and then all of these mask layers, one mask layer for each of the markers. And then we parented them to the trackers that follow the face, and then we have to animate them. We had to babysit them quite a bit. As you can see, all of these animation keyframes, and we had to squish them and manipulate them to adjust to the turning of the face. And this took me hours and hours to do because we had to go one by one mask layer at a time, and go through the whole thing and babysit them. And you can kind of see sometimes it's like frame by frame by frame. And if you watched the last video, you know that this method is my least favorite method because of so many different reasons, but mainly because the mask keyframe timeline is much more limited than any of the other animation timelines in all of Blender. So it's very limited, it functions differently, and it's a pain to work with. But I wanted to go over it because this is the traditional 2D mask method. So this is still useful information for any sort of visual effects work. And if you remember, the splines created this. This is our end result here that we achieved from last time, where all of the masks are covering the blue markers on my face, and they are following the motion of the face. But in this video, I'm going to show you an alternate method that's 10 to 20 times faster and will achieve similar, if not even better results. So let's get started. We're going to, instead of using two-dimensional masks, we're going to use our 3D motion and add in 3D geometry. So let's go back to our motion tracking workspace. And I'm going to pull this down so we can see up over here. Actually, let's pull this down so we can do this side by side like this. So everything we're going to do right now, we've done before in a previous chapter. So I'm going to go over it a little bit more quickly this time. If you want to see it in more detail, go back to the chapter where we talk about setting up the 3D scene for our 3D motion trackers. But in this video, I'm actually going to do it slightly differently. But first, before we do anything, we got to make sure that our solve error is good. So this was our solve error that we did in that chapter. We need to have this at least under 1, and if possible, 0.5 or below. So 0.6 is just fine for our purposes. And this time, instead of adding a camera manually and adding our camera solver, we're going to come over here to our Solve tab and then scroll down all the way to the bottom where it says Scene Setup, and then click Setup Tracking Scene. And boom, we have all of the information we need here. We actually have too much information. So it created a foreground and a background up here for us. So I'm going to right-click the foreground, delete hierarchy, and the same thing for the background. We just need the camera and its information, which is right here. And then I'm going to press 0 to go into camera mode. And here's what we have. Let's make these tracking markers a little bit smaller. So I'm going to do 0.01. Okay, and then they're still not lining up like they should. And if we come to our camera data, you can see that under the camera and the lens, we have the focal length here matches over here, because actually when we clicked Set Up Tracking Scene, it just basically copied all of these settings over to our 3D camera. So you can see that the camera size, the 35 millimeters, that is our sensor width. You can see that same thing here. So why doesn't it match up? Well, to be honest, I don't know. The last time what we did was we just took the focal length down, and you can hold Shift to be a little bit more accurate and just line it up manually like this. And then if we scrub through the timeline, you can see that that works just fine. But I'm going to undo that, because we're going to keep the copied settings. And what I found is that if you come over here to the camera and then the sensor fit, if you play around with this, it may actually correct it for you. Now, I think this is because I have a vertical camera. You would think vertical would help, but that actually just makes it worse. But I found clicking horizontal in this instance actually lines everything up perfectly. So it depends on your footage, it depends on your camera. You might want to play around with these to see if one of those works. And if it doesn't, then just keep it at auto and then manually slide this until it fits. Okay, and then I'm also going to go to background images. We're going to see uncheck render undistorted and then opacity all the way up. Perfect. Now we need a 3D mesh in here, and remember that's how we created our occlusion mask before, so we're going to do the same thing, and that is coming over here. Make sure that the clip display shows disabled as well, so that we see everything and we can press A to select everything. So we need to make sure everything is selected, and then come up to the top here where it says reconstruction. And you can see link empty to track and 3D markers to mesh right here. You can also see this over here. So under geometry, I'm just going to click 3D markers to mesh. And now we have a new tracks mesh object here in our 3D scene that consists of just points. Again, we've seen this before. And actually, before you click the button, you want to make sure you're on the frame that you need it to be on. So remember, frame 490, if we hit home over here, is sort of our starting frame where we're face on the camera. So just make sure that's where we are. Again, this is going to be different depending on your footage. And now let's go into full 3D mode. I already have one here, but I'm going to actually delete this one because I want to get the defaults back. So I'm just going to go to General and then Layout, adding a new one. And then here is our camera. But if I move my camera, you can see that the mesh object doesn't move with it. So we're going to temporarily parent this. So I'm just going to select this, Shift select this, Control P, and then keep transform. And now when I move the camera, you can see that moves with it. So with the camera selected, we're going to Alt G to clear the location, Alt R to clear that rotation, go into side mode, and then R to rotate 90, and that's the wrong way, so I'm just going to hit the minus button to flip it, and then enter, and then just grab this, and I'm going to make sure that these points are lined up with the Z-axis here, kind of like where the nose is, and just a little bit above the ground here. So it doesn't really matter all that much, but I like this placement. We can also Shift S to set that cursor to the world origin. Another thing I'm going to do is come to my camera data, viewport display, and take that size down. This doesn't affect anything with the camera and what it sees. This is just the display of the wireframe in the 3D preview. Okay, and if we pull this up and hover over the timeline, press home, and now we can see, we have a keyframe here, and that's because I still have auto keying on. So let's uncheck that. So I'm just gonna make sure everything in the timeline is selected, and then X to delete. And now if we come out here, and if we come to our motion tracking, and then we gotta make these ones smaller too. Each workspace is different, so you have to do the same things again, which I don't like. And then if we scrub through here, you can see that our motion trackers are moving, but the tracking points aren't because we haven't constrained them yet. But if you remember from the other video, what I did instead of constraining them directly, we actually added an empty. But before we add the empty, let's take the tracks. If we select the tracks, then you can see the origin point is over here. For some reason, I don't know why it does that. But if you don't see the origin, just make sure origins is selected here. But we need to fix that, so just right click and then set origin and then origin to geometry, and then it will pop that right here in the middle of all of those points. And then with that origin there, we can take the 3D cursor, Shift S, and then cursor to selected, and then it will snap that to the origin. And now we can add in an empty and then sphere. Then we can just scale this down, and we've done all of this before again in another chapter, so you should be familiar with this. So we're going to take this one again, make sure we're on 490, go to the Constraints tab, and then add an object solver with the object being the head and the camera being the camera. Click Set Inverse, and now that should follow with the motion. And we do that so anything that we add in here, we can easily parent it to the empty instead of always adding a constraint to every object. So with that said, we can take the tracks, and I can actually, in the outliner, I can click and drag and then shift and hold and parent it to that empty. And so it does parent it, but it pulls it all the way up here, and I'm not entirely sure why. So instead of doing that, I'm going to undo that. Instead of doing that, let's just take that and then shift select it in here, and then Control P, and then it gives us this option to keep transform, which will keep it in the same spot. And now everything should follow the motion of the head. which means we can hide the empty and we can also hide our motion tracking. So now our tracks, which we should select officially there, are moving with the motion of the head, and this is officially a mesh or a geometrical object. And with that, now comes the fun part. So I'm going to pull up another area over here, and then I'm going to change it to the geometry node editor. And remember, geometry nodes are modifiers. So if we go to our modifiers tab and then we click new here, you can see it adds a modifier for geometry nodes. So let's take these and scale them out a little bit. We want to add in right here instances and then instance on points. So I'm going to drop that right in the middle. And then we have to tell what we want to drop on the points. You see, we don't see the points here anymore because it's looking for an instance. So we need to take this instance, drag it out, start typing circle, and we're going to choose the mesh circle. And now we have that instanced on here. And that looks actually pretty cool. I actually really like that. But you can see, well, what is happening here? Well, if we take the radius down, I'm going to take the radius down to like 0.2. And then I'm going to come over to the scale because it's going to be a little bit difficult just changing the radius. So I'm going to now take the scale. I'm going to click and drag and then drag that down holding shift. Drag that down to maybe like 0.08. And now you can kind of see what's happening. So we have all these rings that are on the points of the mesh, and they should all follow just like our mesh does. But of course they are oriented the wrong way and we have to rotate them. But the thing is, we don't know which direction to rotate them because we don't know which direction is facing front. And right now they're all hollow, so we need to fill them in, and that's the fill type here. So we want to change that to Ngon. That's going to be our best option for our scenario here. And then we can come up to the overlays and then choose face orientation. And the blue is going to be the front face and the red is going to be the back face. So we obviously want the front face facing the camera. So we're going to start to rotate this. And you would think it'd be the Z, but it's not the Z, it's actually the Y, at least in my situation here. So I'm going to rotate the Y, and it looks like it's going to be negative, and it's going to be just negative 90. Okay, so now they're all facing toward the camera. And we can go into camera mode and see that. And let's actually pull these down to 0.1. Okay, there we go. And then we can shift and we can kind of drag these to kind of a decent size for what we need. Okay, but we still have tracks as one object. We need to make sure that these are all their own objects. So what we can do is separate these, but before we separate them right now, we just have instances. So we've taken the mesh and we've converted it into an instance. So we need to actually realize these instances by adding a realize instance node right here. And then that makes these instances geometry again, actual mesh. And then we can now apply, make sure we're in object mode. We can come over and apply this geometry nodes modifier. And now this is an actual legitimate mesh. But it's still just one object, so we want to separate all of these by going into edit mode and then P and then separate by loose parts. And now we have all of these tracks, which are just like all of the mask layers that we have here, but you can see how fast we've already created these. We didn't have to do them individually, one at a time. We used geometry nodes to add them all at the same time, scale them all at the same time, and we're already so much further along in only a few minutes, which again already makes this method so much better. So we don't need the geometry nodes anymore. But of course, we don't want all of these facing the camera. We want them to conform to the face. So let's go over to our frame 540, and then we can select them and start to rotate them. I'm going to start getting rid of some of the ones that we don't need. These were trackers that didn't have actual painted markers. So let's delete those. The way I like to do this, if you double tap A to deselect everything, and I don't know why that's not deselecting everything. Oh, we're still in edit mode, so let's tab out of edit mode, double tap A, and then I like to circle select, so C to circle select, and you notice if I do this, I can't select any of them for some reason. And that reason is because the origin point for every single one of these is still right here in the middle. If I select that one, you can see it selects all of them at the same time. So that's not what we want. So let's right click out of that. Remember, we have to right click out of the circle select, otherwise we can't do anything else on our screen. So right click, and then with all of them selected, we can now right click and then set origin to geometry. Now all of their individual origins will go into the center of the geometry for all of those. So now double tap A, C to circle select, and now we can start to circle select the ones that we don't want. So we can delete those. So right click to cancel out of that, and then X to delete those. Okay, so now let's select some of these that we want to rotate. So just the ones that are like on the side of the face here, maybe like that. And then we want to rotate them, but I'm going to rotate them in global mode. So we want to R and then Z, we want to rotate them on the Z. And make sure we also have individual origins as our pivot point. So there we go. And we just want to rotate them to where those are now facing the camera. But if I come back to frame 490, I can also see that's not exactly right. So I'm just going to rotate those to where it looks right. Like it looks like it's rotated facing the same way the side of my face is facing. So right there. And of course, we will have to adjust them individually as well. But for right now, this is what we have. Already pretty good results sticking to the side of the head, which is nice. So we'll come back and adjust those individually, but let's keep going. Let's do the other side of the face here. Let's actually kind of go back this way. Oh, let's get rid of these. So actually, let's double tap to make sure we don't have anything selected except for the ones we want to delete, and get rid of those. And now we can select the ones on the side of the face here, like that. And maybe that one as well. I'm not going to select this one. Maybe this one also. All right, so let's rotate those as well, something like that, and then go to 490 again and adjust them a little bit more. Here, like this, and this one, okay, I'm going to rotate that by itself, because that's going to be more like that. All right, and then that looks all right. Maybe also rotate this one a little bit better here. Okay, so we're getting somewhere now. But now you might notice that we can still see those back faces when my head turns. And even if we turn off those face orientation, you can see we're still seeing those back faces. So this is another one of the great benefits to doing it this way, is we can actually turn off those back faces. So when we're in solid shaded mode, all we have to do is come over here and then click backface culling. And all of a sudden, now we can't see those back faces. Ta-da! So then when my head turns, we're not going to be able to see those, which is exactly what we want. We still have some adjusting to do, of course, but that's going to be super beneficial, because what that's going to eliminate is the need for us to move those circles out of the camera. We can keep them here, and then when my head turns, they will be occluded from the view automatically. I notice we have a double here, so I'm just going to take one of those and delete that. So now let's start to adjust them a little bit individually. I'm going to start with this one up here. So one of the things we can do is either come into wireframe mode, or we can stay in solid mode and then X-ray, so that we can see the X-ray there. But let's see, does that help us with? Yes. So this is actually, X-ray is going to be nice because then we can see the blue marker, but we can also see when, if we rotate this, you can see where the back face starts. So we know which direction it's actually pointed. If you're just in wireframe, it's hard to tell which one is the front facing. Let's bring that X-ray down just a little bit though, so it's not quite so strong. So now with this, the best way to go about this, in my opinion, is to click this button here for the move, and then come over here and change to local. And that way, if we come out here and we see that if we click each of these, they all have their own local axes that we can manipulate. And you can see that the x-axis is going to be forward and back, no matter which one we have selected. It's always going to be forward and back. The z-axis is going to be side to side, and the y-axis is going to be up and down. And that will also take into account any sort of rotation. So if I rotate this on the z like this, so it's tilted, the up is always going to be relative to the placement of the circle, which is going to be really nice. I'm going to undo that. And so this is going to help us. In here, we can rotate on the z. We know that kind of tilts that like that. And then this is forward and back, so we kind of make that a little bit more forward. And then I'm going to rotate it also on the y so that it is facing more of the appropriate direction, and we can test and see what that looks like. So it looks good all the way up until it turns here like this, and you can see that it should already be invisible. So which means I can rotate it on the y until it is pretty much just flat like this. And now I can rotate it on the z as well, and rotate it on the y again. See, now I know this is the back face because there's nothing there, and this is the front face. So it's going to be like right there, and then rotate on z, yeah, like this. Okay, and then we can see if that, yes. So, and it doesn't matter if that hovers over because we're not going to see this anyway. And that is, it's actually pretty good, except for, I think I want to pull it over on the Z just a little bit. So that's covering that. And then maybe down just a little bit as well. Okay, so that looks like maybe that's sliding a little bit. Let's pull this over. The one thing that I don't like is that I can't lock the view to this, so I have to keep changing the view, which is, it's all right. I much prefer this method regardless. Okay, so that's pretty good with that one. And so essentially what we're going to do is that with every single one of these here. Now this one didn't have a tracker because it didn't track very well or something like that. So what we can do, we don't need a tracker because if we just duplicate one of these, we can put that here and it's going to automatically go with the motion because it's automatically in that circle our tracks, which is parented to that empty already. But we do have to manually line it up. So remember, back and forth is the red x-axis, and then we can rotate it on the y-axis, and then the z-axis to place it where we think it should go, and then we can kind of manipulate it like this, just kind of going back and forth, just like we did. And then here, looks like we're going to have to probably rotate that a little bit more. It's pretty close. I don't know if I want to mess with that anymore. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, there is a little bit of sliding. You can kind of see that. Let's do... Oh, that's really sliding. Okay, so if it's sliding like this, we can kind of go back and forth. In the front, okay, that looks good. And then on the side, okay, pull this down and then over. And if we did it on the z-axis on one of them, then we don't want to manipulate the z-axis again on this one. It's just we're just going to move it back and forth. So we need to move it on the x-axis here, and then in this frame on the z-axis in order to line that up correctly. So we just keep going back and forth, x and the z. And the y is sort of independent in all of this. And oh, see, I'm doing it on the wrong, accidentally. Okay, yeah, so I'm doing something wrong here. So, okay, z, y. Okay, Okay, X, Y, Z. Nope. Okay, so this is actually going terribly. I'm going to undo all of that. So maybe in the front here, then I'll move it on the Z, and then over here, I'll move it on the X, because this is back and forth. And then maybe that is Y. Okay, yeah. So this looks a little bit better. Just going back and forth until we get it just right. Little tedious, but nothing like having to babysit those keyframes, which we aren't adding any keyframes yet anyway. And if we get them just right, we might not even have to add any keyframes, which again makes this so much better than the 2D method. Okay, I think that's actually pretty good. Let's just watch it. Okay, now let's see, we'll pull this over like that. And then just kind of drag that. It is still sliding a bit. Okay, there we go. I think rotating it on the Y helped out a little bit. Yeah, there we go. I mean, it is still sliding a tad, but at least it's covering it for the most part. Let's see what happens when we go the other way. Okay, I think it's going to be easier to figure this out going this way, like we had done it before. Or this is not as easy as the other ones, just because again, there's no real tracker that it's tracking. Okay, I think that's good enough here for the most part. We can always come back and tweak these later, but that is the gist of it. So what I'm going to do is just go around the whole rest of the face and just do the same thing, rotating them, scaling them to fit all of them, and making sure they stick where they're supposed to throughout the whole rotation of my head. And we're also going to have to put one here because there wasn't a tracker there either. So we can actually duplicate this one. I like that one there. Okay, so I like that enough. We can always come back and tweak these later, but you may have noticed we've got the backface culling solving that problem for us, but you can see that the places where the nose is supposed to be occluding that, it doesn't, because we don't have any geometry here where the nose is. So we want to add some geometry just so that it hides the masks where the nose would hide those naturally. On this side and on this side. So we're going to add just a small piece of geometry for the nose. Let's go back to 490. I'm going to select this one, Shift S, cursor to selected, add in a mesh UV sphere, scale that all the way down here like this, and then Control A, apply that scale. Let's do something that we should have already done, I forgot to do, but we're going to take all these tracks. So the easy way to do that is just select the track here in the outliner and then go to the last track and then shift select this one. So now all of these are selected, and then in the preview, press M and then new collection. We're going to call this circles. Okay, and now we can easily turn that collection on and off. The other thing I want to do is take the sphere and then hold down Shift and drag that into the empty. That's going to parent it to the empty so that it moves with the motion of our head. There we go. So now we can start to shape this to our nose. This is the easiest way that I have found to do it. You can add in a cube and then extrude stuff out and then follow the nose more closely. I'm not going to do that because remember, this isn't to recreate the nose. This is just to create a mask for occluding some of the circle masks that are on my face. So let's, I'm going to pull out another area and go into, let's hide the camera. Just want to have something where I can select the faces easier. I'm just going to get rid of, just going to T and then get rid of that and get rid of our text info just so we can see things a little bit easier here. Going to edit mode and let's turn off X-ray mode, but go into wireframe and turn off X-ray mode and wireframe as well. Or to rotate, we're just going to rotate that here. And I actually just want to rotate it on. What are my axes here? Oh, I can't, I turned the extras off. There we go. The x-axis is what I want to rotate that on, like that. So just so that kind of follows the shape right there, this is the tip of the nose. Circle select those, going to take those and move those just in proportional editing mode here. I'm going to just drag that up like this. And then take the back faces here. I'm just kind of eyeballing it and then pull that back. There we go. So we're starting somewhere here. Take the front here and then just make sure that's on the tip of the nose there. Let's take the back over here. Oh, I don't want the front. Double tap A. Let's take these. Just to follow the shape of the nose a little bit better. Just take the sides here and with median point we can scale those out like that. Okay, I'm just kind of manipulating the geometry just enough to where we're going to have that mask occluding stuff out. This isn't perfect, and it's also not again, we're not recreating the nose. So we're going to bring this back. There we go. That's not terrible. Don't forget to save as you go along. Now, what we're going to notice here, we're going to have to adjust some things. And we're going to have to probably use some shape keys. So this looks all right here, but if we shape it here, if we have the full profile of the face, and then here, let's grab the very tip of the nose. We want to pull that down. When we do this and the face then starts to move, you can see that it's not quite all lined up here. And we can spend the time, it's up to you. If you want to spend the time to actually try to manipulate the geometry in a way that is gonna, so if I grab this on the normal, pull that out here, just like that. That's going to be just consistently following that. It's going to take a lot of time going back and forth, but it can be done depending on how well your track is. But if you don't have that good of a track or it keeps moving, it's probably better to add some shape keys. And we're going to do that here with this over here. So you can see that it's lined up pretty good right here. But when we come to our frame 540, it is no longer lined up. So we're going to change that by adding shape keys. So let's go back to here. This is going to be our basis. What we have to do is be in object mode first. Go down to the data tab. We have a section called shape keys, add one. This is our basis. We want to make sure relative is checked. Then I'm also going to check apply shape keys in edit mode. This is going to help us with different iterations as we go. So now I'm going to add in another one, and it's going to be key 1, and this is going to be at 0. We're going to leave that at 0 here for a second. So let's see what it looks like on frame 490. That looks okay. And then frame 540, this is where we're going to have to change it. So if we tab into edit mode and then we take the nose and just shape it again. If you press G, nothing happens. I believe that this is because this has to be at 1. And there we go. Okay, so now we can shape it. But if we uncheck this and leave that at 0, we can then shape it. And then after we shape it and we go back out into object mode, it snaps back. And if we go back and forth in object mode, you can see. And then we take this up to 1. And now you can see what's happening. So it's morphing it from our basis shape key to the key 1 shape key. So that's what's happening here. Apparently, if we apply it here, it won't let us move anything while it's at 0, so it has to be at 1. So that's just kind of how that works. And it's probably not a good idea for me to move it like this anyway. I'm actually going to delete that, add another one, because what I want to do is I want to restrict. I don't want it to go left and right, because if we look at our nose here, the y-axis is back and forth, the x-axis is side to side, and z-axis is up and down. Okay, so we don't want to go side to side. We want to go up and down and back and forth. Press G to grab, and then Shift X excludes that. So now you can see that if I do that again, G Shift X, I'm only going back and forth and up and down, which is good to do that when you're looking in camera mode so that it lines things properly. If I just start clicking and dragging, I'm going to be going on all 3 axes, and I don't want to do that. So anyway, let's tab into edit mode again. Let's bring this all the way up to 1. And then I'm going to press G and then Shift X. And that way we can position this more appropriately. Same thing here. Let's go to the top. I'm going to select that one and maybe that one. G Shift X, and then same thing. Just going to bring that up like that. And so at 0, we're at our basis shape key, and at 1, we're at this shape key. So on 540, we want the nose to look like this. So I'm going to put a keyframe at 1. And then, of course, we can do keyframe. Well, let's just do it at the beginning. We'll do a keyframe at 0 at the beginning, so it looks like this. So it will slowly transition that and morph into what we want at this. So there we go. So it gives the appearance that it always fits to our nose, even though technically it doesn't. We had to tweak it, but it works well enough for our purposes here. And what this is going to do, if we've positioned this just right, it's going to start to occlude those circles. And this actually lines up to the nose. I got lucky. Lines up to the nose pretty well. You might have to play with this. This is like the 3rd or 4th iteration that I've done, so I'm actually kind of used to doing it. But if it's your first time, it might take a while, and you might have to come in and adjust these a little bit more. And you might have to even add more shape keys. So in order to do that, maybe like right here, you might have to add another one. And you just, you have to add them in object mode. So go into object mode, and you can actually put this one before, and then pump that up to 1, and then you can adjust it however you want here. And then you add that keyframe there. And then go all the way to 0 and add that keyframe. So now you're animating the shape in the way that it needs to be animated to fit that nose perfectly. So I'm going to kind of watch it as it goes. Okay, so yeah, so like think right here. since it's going to go back this way and we already have those keyframes, I'm going to take, I think I'm just going to take these keyframes, and you know what? Let's go to the dope sheet. That's going to be better. So let's bring this up a little bit here, grab another window, pull that down so we keep this toolbar, and then change this one to the dope sheet. And what we can do when we open up here, we have our two keys here, key 1 and key 2. And so the key 1, I think that's the one we want. So that is this one. So I'm just going to duplicate that one, pull it over here. And this is so much better than the masking stuff. So yeah, see, that snaps then to what it should be there. And then, yeah, and so that forms to this just fine, just like it should. And that can stay, that actually can stay there. Awesome. So, okay, let's enable our circles and see what's happening here. So just ignore these two circles. I'm just going to hide those for now. But you see these circles on the face, when the nose is over it, it hides those, which is exactly what we want. And same thing on the other side, it's going to hide those. Oh, and we might have to adjust this a little bit better over here. So we got, yeah, so it's not quite there. I want to adjust, yeah, it's going to be on our key 1. So I'm going to select that one and then just make sure that we have this occluding the way it needs to be. So I don't have to add another keyframe because it's actually, since I selected key 1, it's going to attribute it to the value here. Perfect. Okay. Okay, that's good enough. Like I've been saying, we can always come back and adjust these later if we need. But we need to take care of the ones that we hid on the nose. So I'm going to hold down Shift, click this one to disable all of those, and then hold down Shift again and click again, and then it will enable everything. Let's go to our frame 490, and let's go into solid shaded mode. The way we can do this pretty easily is we can take this and let's rotate it on the X a little bit more conform to the nose, pull this out, and I'm going to do Control 2, right? Yes, and so that's going to add our subdivision surface modifier, and then I'm going to add another modifier and do a shrink wrap. And we're going to select target normal projection, and then we're going to say on surface is fine, and then select the target as our nose, which is sphere. We just call this nose for convenience sake. But we select this again, and it's working, but it's kind of Z-fighting right now, so we're going to do an offset. We're going to do a really small offset, though, so I'm going to do 0.0008. I think that's what I used before. You might have to play around with this, but I want to get it close as possible without actually intersecting. So actually, I might be able to get away with 5. Nope. So see, you can see that's cutting through. So let's maybe do 6. No, 8. 8 is going to be our best bet. Let's do 8. It's going to be our safest there. Okay, and we're going to do that same thing with the other one. Select that one. Bring that out here. Another way we can do this actually is, and I forgot, so we along with the offset, what we can do is just bring this closer or further out. So then I can bring that down to 0. Yeah, except for now. So maybe now I can do 0.0005 and then just pull that out. Yeah, I like that. Let's try it with this one. Control 2, add in shrink wrap, target normal projection. Could have also just copied to selected, but oh well. 0.0005, and then pull that out a little bit like that. Maybe a little bit more. We can maybe adjust. Maybe this one will be 8. There we go. Okay. All right. So now what we have is this. But to see the full effects, let's add some materials to this. So first thing I want to do is select one of the circles and then go to material, add in a new material. I'm going to title this white and then change the surface to emission, and this should be white. Now let's go to our material preview mode. Now if we look in the back of this here, we can still see the back face because we're not in solid shaded anymore, so we don't have the same options. So while we are in Eevee, so this is a feature of Eevee, in our materials, let's scroll down and enable backface culling. And that gives us the same option as if we were in solid shaded mode, same thing, backface culling. So, but now we're in material mode and we can put any material on this, and the white is the front facing material. So let's, with that selected, right click our circles collection, go to select objects, and then the active one needs to have our material on it, and then hover over here, Control L for link, or you can come to object and then link transfer data. So Control L is the shortcut key, and then link materials. And now they all have the same material with that back face not showing. Good. Now we need to select the nose, and we're going to give the nose a new material, and we're going to call this holdout. And this is going to be the holdout, of course. Okay, and now in our camera mode, you can now see if we deselect everything. And actually, I'm going to hide some things here. So I'm going to hide the origins, the 3D cursor, and outline selected. So now when we scrub through, you can see that the nose appears to block all of that stuff behind it. And the ones on the nose conform to the nose just right. And again, we haven't added any keyframes except for our shape keys, and that was pretty easy to do. And so let's see what our final result is going to look like if we come to rendered mode. We can see our big nose here, but we just have to uncheck overlays and then come to render, scroll down to film, and then click transparent. And this is what our final result is. And this is what we'll be using in the compositing. And this is exactly what we had with our masking here, but we achieved it so much faster and so much more intuitive using our 3D workspace instead of hand keyframing all of these 2D mask layers for animation, taking hours and hours to do. And so in 3D mode, once we put this through the compositor, we will have the black background. Now, you can do this in the 3D view if you wanted to. You can come to world and then choose a black background for the world, and then uncheck transparent. But you still have the holdout texture there, and that's going to get rid of the world and everything behind it. So that's why you see that gray still. So what you would want to do for the nose is to change that material to an emission and then change this to black. And there you go. You can achieve then the same result. There you go, black and white, just like we did with our two-dimensional masks. But again, this isn't actually necessary because we can translate that into a black and white mask in the compositor. All right, so there's one last thing that you might want to do, and that has to do with how good your track is and if it jumps at all. So if we enable the motion tracking here again, and then go to solid shaded mode, if we come over here, I think it's around 620. You can see this jumping. So from 627 to 628, it actually jumps a little bit. It's not much, but it is a little annoying. Plus, it doesn't look like I've positioned these well enough just yet. So I'm going to adjust those here anyway. first. So let's do that first. Pretty good here, and then they jump. So the way that I would solve this is with a lattice, and we've done this same thing before. When we set up the skull to our head, we used a lattice to shape it. We can do the same thing with these circles. So I'm going to disable that again, and let's hide the camera just for now. Oh, so let's just hide the camera for now, and then we can let's enable all of this stuff again. Okay, and let's do cursor to selected, and then add in a lattice, of course, and then let's just shape it to our face here. All right, something like that. And then before I do anything, I want to Shift D to duplicate this. And then also we got to be careful. So we've added the lattices. Anyway, we've added these to the circles, and I don't want that. Let's just select both of those and M to scene collection. And then we want to click and drag these and shift to the empty, because we want it to follow the motion of our head, but we don't want them to be in the circles collection. And the reason we duplicated one is to have one to fall back on. I'm just going to disable those for now. That's just in case we mess up, we can delete this lattice and we have one ready to go right away. Okay, so now we need to apply it. So right click and select objects for our circles, and then shift click the nose. So we'll apply it to the nose first. So add a modifier, lattice. Of course, we want to choose the first lattice here. And then with everything still selected, we can do the drop down and then copy to selected. So now all of them should be affected by that lattice. And if I go tab into edit mode for the lattice, I can move these around and they all follow. Now this is only going to help us so much, so we got to be careful. You can see the ones on the nose aren't following very well. So you just got to be careful. But all I'm really going to be doing is using this to rotate them anyway. So I'm not going to actually warp them. So let's see where we need to rotate these. Let's unhide our camera again and 627. And then we need to, just like we did with the nose, add in a shape key. So in our data properties of the lattice, we can add a shape key. But of course, tab into object mode. We have to be in object mode to add. So we got a basis, and let's bring this back to 627. And then we need our key 1. Let's click this and bring this to 1. So now we can tab back into edit mode and A to select all the points, and then R to rotate on the Z. Oh, we need to see. So there we go. Rotate on the Z like that. Now tab back on object mode, add in our keyframe, and then on 27, bring this down to 0 and add in our keyframe. So it's just from one frame to the next. There we go. And look at that. That solved our jumping just like that. I could also tweak these and put them in a better spot and rotate them a little bit better. But that helped with our jumping. And so we might want to also look over here. That actually is okay. All right, so that I think is it. So again, this isn't all that necessary if you have a good track, but if you have some jumping, this is how you can compensate for that. So let's again go to our final render result here and take a look at what we have. Oh yeah, this is awesome. And so if this is the first time you're doing this method, it might take a little bit longer, but once you get a hang of it, you could do this in 20 to 30 minutes tops. I mean, this is so much faster than the 2D method, and it's one of my favorite ways, and I'm so glad I discovered it.